Hello, everybody. Hope you all had a good Christmas and you're going to have a happy new year. So, I figured I haven't done a stream for a while. I'm going to try to get Serp on to do a predictions for 2022. But I figured I'd just come on, say hi to everybody, maybe kind of talk about some of the big stories of the year. People always have questions for me, and I often just find it easier to explain them verbally than to go through and do some write an essay or something. So it kind of is what it is, I suppose. Uh, Also, just to show the recent updates to the meme Taj. I need to go through my Facebook because I have a bunch of additional shit that I need to upload. So it's been kind of both quite a year and not a year at all. It's kind of, in some ways, it's been like a double decker hamburger. In other ways, it's been a nothing burger. So, I mean, this year we had 9/11 times 1,000. We had COVID, which keeps going on and on and on and on. I had some stuff in my personal life. At the same time, though, kind of nothing happened. We didn't have a civil war. 9/11 times 1,000 didn't result in the U.S. government being overthrown. All kinds of stuff like that. So it is very much kind of a nothing burger of a year combined with a something burger of a year, I guess. So we'll start in a minute or two. Just updating the meme Taj. I think there was some e drama this year. We could maybe talk about that. We could talk about Ethan Ralph, and I don't know if I have much Arini shit to talk about. I just kind of got bored with that whole thing, so. Wow, this is early. What do you think we should do in Russia and China? Should we get Ukraine into NATO, and how are you? Uh, I'm all right. Um, I've been better and I've been worse. I just don't know what's happening or is going to happen. The industry I'm working in at the moment is very dependent upon things being open. So was my last job, and I got laid off from my last job, not because of performance or anything, but because, well, you know, um, the company I was working for lost like 50% of, like 80 to 90% of its revenue overnight, and they had to lay me off. Sorry, like 90% of its revenue. So the company I'm working for now will probably um, return to what's it called again? Yeah. So Ukraine will join NATO. I think I've been pretty consistent on this. I think Ukraine is part of Russia, or at least belongs in the Russian sphere of influence. I don't know. So I tend to take that perspective. Um, from my understanding, there was some sort of agreement between the United States and Russia that Russia would not attempt to. No, sorry, the United States would not attempt to put the Soviet Union into NATO. And once again, if we're gonna, and this is kind of, I guess, a bit Noam Chomsky-ish, but if Mexico had have joined the Warsaw Pact, then I don't think the U.S. would have stood for it, to be honest. And I think that's just kind of something you have to keep in mind. With regards to China, it kind of got a little bit cringy with it got cringy with what's it called again? Um, Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here for a minute. With all the people who started shilling for China as if China's some sort of friend to us, and they're based, and they're gonna bring back traditional values, and they're gonna overthrow the West and stuff like that, and it's gonna all turn out okay for us, but that's just I don't know. I just think it's wish fulfillment. There's also the fact that uh what was the other thing? I lost my train of thought there for a minute. Just adding in some more memes to the meme Taj. Let's see here. New Yorkers. All right. I'm taking questions mostly from chat. Oh, let me switch from top chat to live chat. I fucking hate the top chat live chat distinction. Just because the top chat is shit. Let's see here. Other than Hungary getting land, we need to somehow let them swallow Belarus so we get rid of and keep peace while crushing China, return the emperor. I tend to be anti-China but pro-Russia, if that makes sense. Okay, let me just go back to some stuff. Are you a PPP Chad or a surfer homo? I've talked to PPP. I've had him on once. Uh, I more took PPP's side in it. Although if the stuff is true about him like manipulating the e-girls to send him shit and getting them to film themselves doing degrading sex acts, he really should not have been doing that. I can't support stuff like that, but I was definitely more on PPP's side than Surfer's. Surfer was occasionally funny, but in a lot of cases he was just really, really obnoxious. Why is Israel our greatest ally? Do you think COVID will become endemic and immigration will re enter the conversation? That's an interesting question. Or sorry, let me finish the pay one. I never really know what to make of him, to be honest. He's a troll, but he's sometimes serious. I can't. He's someone who I find very hard to get a read on. I will say this, and I've said this in other um, things. You can say what you want, but the criticism that Godwinson and him have basically snaked on everybody who they've ever had an association with, I think is fair. So I mean, like Jarbo, they had the whole majestic the map thing. There was Gahul, Leo Pirate, Aid Zero. Who else was there? Warski to a certain extent. Um, they briefly supported Randbot. I mean, I forget everybody else, but basically everybody that they've brought on, they have kind of thrown under the bus. And I like Pay. He's been nice to me when I've talked to him, but that's just kind of the reality of the situation. And I mean, if you want to take that as me throwing him under the bus, I mean, I'd say that to him. So let's see here. Uh, what else do we have here? Uh, Long term impacts of COVID. So, okay, Kraut. Kraut is the only person they haven't snaked with. Probably because Kraut just had a really big following. I'm kind of sad there was. I don't know if anyone remembers the schizo play that the Grand Wazoo 42 did last year. Like, just with all the insanes, like Sonic the Hedgehog and Dick Masterson is in it. And then Godwinson is like an assassin sent by Joshua Moon. I have it up on the Sigma Supreme. I think it's called the best Christmas album ever, or something to that. And it's just the most schizo thing I've ever seen. I was kind of disappointed there wasn't another Christmas album this year, because I've listened to that like 4 or 5 times, and it's just the most insane shit, like the most batshit crazy thing that referenced all kinds of esoteric lore. So, what seems to be going on. Yeah, sorry. So, what seems to be going on is in Ontario at the moment, and we'll get into kind of the longer term thing in a minute. But so we have Omicron, or as I like to call it, Unicron, happening at the moment in Ontario. Actually, you know what? Let me just bring up Brave so we can look at some of this stuff. So I can actually bring some shit up as we're talking. So Unicron has just vastly fucked over everything. There we go. Okay, let me just fix that a little. So I'll just bring this up and then we can talk about Unicron and how it's destroying Ontario and how the whole thing is just kind of like some complete and utter nonsense. I think before we get into this, I think something that's very important to keep in mind is the vast majority of leftists, and this comes from just the normies up to I think most elected officials and most university professors and stuff. They 100% just believe what the mainstream media says. It's not like there's some conspiracy thing or something like that. So let me see here. Okay, so yesterday we had a total of um, 9,571 cases. So if we look at this, let me see if I can go further back. No, November's as far back as we can go. Which I think is an all-time record. Like that's higher than when COVID started out. I think it only got up to about 5,000 cases a day at the height of 2020. So we've reached an all-time high, kind of like the Octopussy song. And there's this massive just panic to try to get the third dose, to try to get the booster dose. They're talking about how in a little while they're going to start requiring it to go to restaurants, to go to work, but there's no doses available. The provincial government completely and utterly screwed the pooch on this whole thing. You can't get a third vaccine dose until February at least. The government shut down most of the testing capacity as well. So we were in this situation where it looked like things were doing good. We were about to completely open up and remove the last restrictions. Then Omicron was announced, and the government didn't do anything. And now Omicron's hit, and nothing is really going on. We're just having this rush. There's no tests available. They keep announcing shit like we're going to be giving out rapid tests um, out at like LCBO. We're going to be giving the tests out at liquor stores. And then they ran out of tests at liquor stores within like 2 hours of them opening, but they were still advertising them. They have this nonsense with like, what was it again? They're having like go buses do mobile clinics, and you had seniors waiting out in like negative 5, 6 degree weather for 4 hours to try to get an additional vaccine or stuff like that. So that whole thing is it's just a clusterfuck. In some regions of the province, you can't even get a third dose of the vaccine unless you're 50 years or older. So you have this kind of environment where the provincial government is aggressively pushing you to get a booster shot, but there's no physical way for you to get a booster shot. So I don't know if it's gaslighting. I don't know if it's incompetence. I think as this time goes on, I more and more think it's just incompetence and they don't know what they're doing, rather than this being any sort of conspiracy. I think, as I said earlier, that they just kind of believe what the media tells them to believe. So even if it may seem completely like retarded and stupid to us, um, I think they just buy whatever Dr. Fauci or Dr. Tam or what any of these assholes say. They will just go and do that. So let me see here. Is there like a longer term? Let's see, all time. Yeah, so the all time. Oh no, that's not. I don't want. I just want provincial wide. Why is it giving me this retarded um, by region? I just want a simple. I don't know. It's so shitty. We've only had 10,000 deaths, which is probably less than what the flu is, or something like that. Short of martial law, 1 month complete vaccine, and complete quarantine, door to door mandatory vaccine, or 2 months of quarantine camp. Oh, and maybe stop letting people fly into Canada from the third world. Yeah, kind of hard to tell what's going to go on with COVID. I think what's going to probably wind up happening um, is they're going to go through another lockdown, then they're going to go out of lockdown, then they're going to go through another one, and they're going to try to come up with some sort of formula where it's just open. Um, Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought there. Um, yeah, so I just think they're gonna kind of go back and forth to just kind of keep the bare minimum of the economy to keep the system going. They'll probably just start forcing people to go back to work in person, regardless of how bad it is. So I'm sure in like a couple months, maybe in the next year or so, even if there's 20,000 cases a day, they're going to be going and just forcing that on people. So you'll still have to go back to work in an office. Maybe you'll have to wear like a hazmat suit or something, but I think companies very much want to end the trend of working from home. So I do think there's more of an objection to getting a third dose. I'm going to admit, though, I'm just kind of demoralized from the whole thing. So I'm just trying to kind of get through one day to the next. I mean, my opinion, and this has been my opinion for probably almost a year now, is I think it's just endemic. I don't think there's realistically anything that can be done. Um, I think they should just remove most of the restrictions. And I think like they should probably keep masks for hospitals, senior homes, other immunocompromised places, possibly public transportation. I think might be fair. And if they want to keep rapid tests, I don't know if they work or not. If rapid tests work at least a little, then maybe keep them for, like I said, places with immunocompromised people and require those before people go in. And I think that's honestly about it. Um, you just kind of have to reach herd immunity at this point. I think we've tried the vaccine thing, we've tried the lockdowns. It's just not going to go anywhere. So that's my opinion. And I mean, you can agree or disagree, but I think at this perspective, it's at this point, it's just we're never going to. It doesn't look like we're ever going to have a vaccine that has a level of protection high enough to end this. We're never going to kind of come up with something that's going to have any other way to control this to any specific amount. So I just kind of think try to do triage and protect the people who need protecting and just kind of accept it. And to be fair, people probably should be wearing masks when they go to senior homes, anyways, because you're dealing with people there who are immunocompromised. And even if COVID is just the flu, bro, or something like that, like a cold could kill these people off. So it's probably makes sense anyways. But by and large, the whole thing is just, yeah. I mean, from my understanding, the vaccine does reduce hospitalization rates, but I don't know. Yeah, the work is trying to get into now needs me to get one. I most likely will because I have a wife and kids to take care of and need a better job. I mean, yeah, it's you got to do what you got to do for your family. Feeding your family comes first. Um, I don't know what else to say. So we have that aspect of it. So maybe briefly talk about 9/11 times 1,000. So I remember I was covering this. I was covering this live back when this happened. What was it? January 6th, January 7th. So we had the election in November of last year, and on the night of, it was pretty clear that Trump won the election. I had stayed up till like 3 or 4 in the morning. I had stayed up till 3 or 4 in the morning, watching it. I called it. The votes were all in. It looked like Trump had actually won with a bigger margin than he did in the previous election. It was even looking like states like Virginia might be very, very close. And then I woke up the next morning and more ballots just kind of kept going in. I remember on election night, in a lot of states, it just stopped counting for prolonged periods of time. And then all the ballots that came in were just for Biden. So once again, it's if there was no electoral fraud, it didn't look like that. If they were frauding, it did look like something like you'd see in Zimbabwe or something in Venezuela. So I remember in Venezuela, they in one of their elections, something like 30 to 40% of the votes came in 5 minutes before the polls closed. After it was clear that the opposition was going to win the election. And that very much seems to have been what happened in the United States. Also, there's the aspect of if it's so self evidently fake, why did they have to go through and ban everybody from everything for even talking about it. Like, to me, if you're just going to be banning people for questioning something, to a certain extent, that shows that you're just very insecure about it. So if there was um, no, what would the term be? Uh, Validity to any of it. It was just completely crazy. I don't get why they needed to go through and ban everybody from every platform who so much as mentioned electoral irregularities. I think the best argument that the election was fraudulent was the claim that, okay, so let's just pretend there was no electoral fraud. The idea that they were pitching was that despite them completely changing the entire electoral system to be mail-in ballots. So yeah, so they changed the entire system to be mail-in ballots. They changed all the rules and laws and stuff. And not only did this not result in any additional administrative issues, but it eliminated all of the other there's somehow fewer issues than normal. So, like I said, even if there was no fraud whatsoever, which we'll just give them that, the idea that there was no administrative issues whatsoever because of COVID is just retarded. Like, there's no way that's not the case. We're supposed to believe the electoral system, which is entirely based on people voting in person, somehow was the only institution in society that had no negative consequences as a result of all this shit happening. And it's ridiculous. I mean, once again, and this I'm saying this from the standpoint of someone who doesn't we're pretending there was no electoral fraud. The narrative doesn't make sense, like, just on the surface level. Um, it's administratively okay. Which one is? Let's just do a thought experiment. Which one is administratively simpler? Someone walks in, you get their ID, you check them off a list, they vote, you put their ballot in the box. Or B, they have to mail you a the ballot in to the right place by the right time with a copy of their ID, and they have to match up signatures and all this other nonsense like that. Um, but yeah, so somehow that's just the case is what we're supposed to believe. But so that happened. Then we had 9/11 times 1,000. So I don't know what to make of the whole Capitol riot. Like, was it a false flag? Was it not a false flag? I tend towards the narrative that Serp has. That Trump just threw a hissy fit. A bunch of boomers just got pissed off and rioted. I don't know if there was necessarily anything coordinated. I think a bunch of people just got really excited. Um, and threw a hissy fit, and then Trump backed down at the last minute, and the whole thing was just a complete and total clusterfuck. Like, it would have been better if the police had have shot a bunch of people, and then it would have been martyrdom, and it would have been state repression. It would have been better if it hadn't have happened. It was just kind of a complete and total joke, and it became 9/11 times 1,000, and it was just super lame. It was literally just the boomer waffin throwing a hissy fit and Trump throwing a hissy fit and nothing important. I think Trump did kind of expose himself to being a snake when he didn't pardon basically anybody. Like, it was within Trump's power to just sign a blanket pardon for everybody at uh, the year of for everybody that was at the Capitol riots. He could have just literally issued a pardon. Everybody was involved with that blanket pardon. They aren't going to jail. But he didn't. He didn't. He did some rappers. He didn't do Skrelly. He didn't do Uncle Ted. He didn't do like anybody. It was just a nothing burger. I guess Steve Bannon, like, pardoning him was okay, but most of it was just fucking lame. And it is kind of weird because the state GOP in a lot of countries, a lot of areas has swung leftward, or sorry, has swung rightward. Like you have the Texas abortion law, you have a bunch of states introducing social media censorship. There is a lot of shifts to the right in a lot of different areas, uh, but they weren't able to do anything about the election, and I doubt they're going to do anything later on. So Adam M says, I think it was a natural riot, but not a coup. There was probably some federal agitation. I think it was just a. I don't get like because people say it was a coup or an insurrection. I mean, it was just literally a bunch of people throwing a hissy fit. There was no actual plan to take control of the government or anything. It wasn't a coup. It wasn't like a revolution. It was just kind of nothing. Um, it was like the Chaz. Actually, it was less organized than the Chaz because the Chaz declared themselves to be an independent state. Yeah, he could have pardoned Snowden. Um, that's a good point. Look, okay, so Snowden is probably a shit lib. I don't know a ton about him. I think at this point, the U.S. federal government is way worse, is way more of a threat to people than terrorists are. Because, I mean, in general, terrorists can just kill like maybe a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand people. But the US government has imposed this totalitarian police state where they spy on everybody all the time, which I just really I don't think is necessary. Maybe it's weird because I'm kind of authoritarian on some issues, but I don't like police states and I don't like surveillance states. There are things that can and should be banned in public because they are damaging to society, and there is things that should be censored. But generally speaking, I really don't like when people go and what is it again? Oh, I lost my train of thought there. I mean, like once again, was it a coup when BLM stormed state capitol buildings or burned stuff down or stuff like that? So there was 9/11 times a thousand. There was a bunch of BLM riots this year. Actually, one of the great ironies regarding what's it called again? Um, the whole social media censorship is a lot of the people in Canada, at least, if you want to get a vaccine, if you want to know the latest updates, they pretty much only post them on Twitter. And I'm permanently banned from Twitter. So because I'm randomly permanently banned from Twitter, I can't access any of that stuff. So I mean that kind of sucks. And I even just I'm kind of curious to see what my MP would want to say about that. So I just kind of went forward and I emailed my MP and I'm like, look, Twitter completely banned me for no reason. How am I supposed to access this critical information? So I'm kind of interested to see what they say back with regards to that. They'll probably say nothing, but I'm just kind of interested to see what the cope is. Yeah, it's a private platform that receives immense amounts of government funding and is used as a primary form of communication with the public. It's totally a private platform. I mean, all of these companies get fuck tons of money from the government. Like it's like, oh, you we don't like you, so you can't use public transit. I don't think that that's even possible. To be honest. So there was 9/11 times 1,000. There was the completely legitimate election in which there was no fraud. I guess there's the predictions for the midterms. Basically, everybody is saying that the Republicans are going to go through and so I don't really know how much like shenanigans will go on because I think that congressional and senatorial elections are more state managed than the presidential one was. I think there might be some reforms to make it less bad. Also, I think it's just harder to get high voter turnout during a midterm. So I tend to think it is quite possible the GOP will recapture both the House and the Senate. I think that's probably more likely than not at this point, but we'll see when we get a bit closer. Okay, so Yurik asked, did you get the Diamond and Pearl remake? Yeah, I can't remember if I got Diamond or Pearl. Yeah, it was good fun. It's a pretty good remake. My biggest issue is it didn't include the platinum content. There were some major issues that kind of irritated me because I wanted to use a Clefable as part of my party, but it's basically impossible to get a Moonstone in that game. You have to get extremely lucky by mining in the underground, and I literally cracked open hundreds of veins and I couldn't get a single one. Let me think. So my party for Diamond Pearl was Rapidash, Shinx, or whatever the fully evolved form of it was, Crobat, um, Empoleon, and I think that was the basis. My basic party was those four. And then I kept trying to do a different one. Unfortunately, because you got a free Mew if you had the previous game. So I got a Mew, and the Mew was low special attack, which sucks because that's basically the purpose of Mew, is to be a special attack monkey. So I had to drop that. Also, just a lot of Pokemon that I normally want were kind of hidden behind the national dex wall. I also wish they'd do something about they do something about the trade only Pokemon. Because either they have to go back to having it where you can set up trades for specific Pokemon, or something else. Because a lot of people just don't have any friends who buy these games, and so if you want to get it out like a Zam or something like that, you're just kind of fucked. And there's nothing you can really do about it. And I do find that kind of annoying. So that's an issue I kind of had with it. Overall, Diamond Pearl is good. Any game that has Cynthia in it is good. If people want to post who they think Pokemon Best Girl is in the chat, they can. I'm on Team Cynthia. I'm just going to go ahead and uh, say Cynthia's Best Girl. I also think she's by far the best champion. She has a very balanced team that is kind of lacking in any sort of gimmick. So yeah, Diamond and Pearl were good. Sword and Shield were just extremely mediocre. It was I call it one step forward, like three steps back. They were super short. None of the Pokemon games are really difficult. They were just so undifficult that even I just kind of got bored and irritated playing them. I do like how they threw a lot of like end game Pokemon in, like Melodic or other stuff like that, which are really hard to get in other games, just kind of all over the place. That's something I did appreciate, that it was kind of a little more randomized like that. But the DLC was shit. The base game had the worst plot of any Pokemon game. I didn't like the setting. I didn't. Leon just. I don't know. I just really hated Leon. It was just not good. I guess the other best Pokemon girl might be someone like. I liked Lorelei a lot as a kid. So, what should the Republicans focus on? The biggest issue with the Republicans is they don't have a health care plan. I mean, that's literally all they need to do. I think America is naturally pretty conservative, and a lot of people don't vote Republican because of health care. I know Serp said that as ultra conservative as he is, the Republican Party's complete lack of a feasible healthcare plan has made him debate. Because if you're somebody, in a lot of cases, that's your number one priority. Uh, like, if you're someone who comes from a family with a pre existing condition or who's facing overwhelming medical bills, even if you disagree with the Democrats on every other issue, that's the thing that is most directly fucking you. So, like, even if I was in the US and I was maybe even at a state level, if the state Democrats were going to bring in some sort of healthcare plan that would help me, and the Republicans weren't, I would be tempted to vote for them solely based on that issue. Once again, there is a very much a cultural divide between Canada and the U.S. Um, Tactical Droid says, "Well, I'm against infanticide, but healthcare though." Yeah, but to be fair, abortion is in a lot of cases just a completely irrelevant topic. I mean, it's changing now, but for the longest time, it's no one could really do anything about it because the court would just strike it down. So it's an important issue, but it was something that really didn't matter because you could have the most pro life people in the world, but they wouldn't be able to enact any kind of laws on it. So that's kind of how I feel about it, to be honest. And that's kind of a thing in Canada too, where it's not really important in elections because There are members of the Conservative Party who are pro life, but no one really cares, to be honest. Like, I don't even really care because it's impossible to ever pass any laws on it. So it's just it's just kind of a nothing issue, and that's unfortunate, but that's just kind of it, um, at the moment at least. But no, the Republicans need some form of health care plan, like just something. I don't think they have any plan at the moment. It's just some vague like free market or something. But it's not even a free market. If America had a free market healthcare system, that would be better than what they have. They have this bizarre chimera of like government and private sector, and somehow people still don't get covered. I don't fucking know. John Real Name says pro-life politics should be the state focus now, since the Supreme Court is dealing with it. We have to have a federal reconstructioning. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It looks like in the U.S. at least there's actually real progress on it. So I think you should shift your priorities around on that, because it looks like states are able to pass laws now. But just for the longest period of time, at least prior to Trump's Supreme Court nominees, there was really nothing that could happen. Tactical Droid says you can't have government healthcare in America because of obesity and black people. Yeah, I mean that's true. It's true, but like that might be like intellectually true, but if you have a parent who needs dialysis or you have a pre-existing condition, you're probably just going to vote based on your personal interest rather than some sort of abstract notion of the greater good. And I can't really blame somebody for doing that. What do you think about Kansuk? It seems to be a fairly popular proposal with Canadian conservatives. I mean, it is what it is. At this point, this country's just kind of fucked. I don't even know if I'm going to vote in the next election, to be honest. Maybe if there's a third party candidate running in my riding, I'll vote for that. I just don't think that there's really much of a point. Uh, the okay, someone's asking if I voted for Trudeau. Okay, so I voted for the first vote I cast in an election was for Michael Ignatieff because I used to be a liberal back in the day, and I primarily voted based on environmental issues. Then I voted for Stephen Harper over Justin Trudeau. Then I voted for Andrew Scheer over Justin Trudeau. And then last time I voted for Maxime Bernier. On a provincial level, I voted for, uh, what was it again? I voted for Doug Ford and I think Tim Hudak. And I don't know what I'm going to vote for in the next election. But I, generally speaking, have just held my nose and voted conservative. But I just can't do that anymore, to be honest. It's just too bad. It's not even better than the liberals on cultural issues anymore. It's not better than the liberals on free speech issues. On economic issues, they aren't going to give me. They aren't even going to give me a tax cuts. There's not even really a point in voting for it. Them based on that. There's no difference whatsoever. So. So the lesson that the federal conservative party took away from the Aaron O'Toole failure is that they ran too far to the right, and they have to like become more left wing. Because Aaron O'Toole, I think he didn't expel party members who didn't get vaccinated, and that was considered an extreme right position. So that's what kind of fucked the conservative party in Canada, according to them. So What do you think of voting Dem in the U.S. for the purposes of accelerating? I think it's super G-slur, to be honest. I think voting based on accelerationism is G-slur. I also think Trump is the accelerationist candidate. I mean, look at all the shit that happened after Trump became president. I think the GOP getting elected leads to more riots. Like things have settled down a bit since Joe became president. But I mean, it's also let's just do a thought experiment, shall we? Who's more likely to pass to reinterpret the Constitution to add it to find a hate speech clause? I mean, it's Democrats. I don't think that's even really a question. Who's more likely to reinterpret the Second Amendment to take away your guns? It's the Democrats. Um, I think once again that's kind of an undeniable truth. So I think the Republicans are the accelerationist party, and if you're trying to organize, I think it's better to have them in a capacity to maintain whatever couple freedoms you have left. So that you continue to organize and continue to get stuff ready behind the scenes. Uh, so that tends to be how I see it. I've actually slightly, so I go back and forth on Trump. I think with the whole Texas thing, I've gone from despising him to thinking he was okay. Because he did make more progress on abortion than anyone I think has since Roe v. Wade. So I gotta give him credit for that, even if he is like buffoonish. Like, okay, so this might be an unpopular opinion. I do think that Trump um, did piss off and alienate a lot of people. So, for middle class people, things like propriety and professionalism and that sort of thing do actually matter. And you can like that or dislike that, but that's just kind of the reality. So, when Trump goes on Twitter and just posts like the crazy shitty posts and makes fun of governors for wanting COVID relief and just posts like just wacky stuff, that pisses off a lot of middle class people, and they view him as not being a serious leader, and they view it as unbecoming of his office and unbecoming of the president when you're posting frat boy shit. And personally, I don't even disagree with that. I think a lot of what Trump did on Twitter was just like bullshit, and he really should not have been doing it. And I do think it hurt him a lot and hurt the cause quite a bit. So yeah, so I mean, once again, it's I don't really know what else to say on it. I think Trump did alienate a lot of people in the suburbs. I think his response to COVID was buffoonish, incoherent, and no one knew what the fuck was going on. So, if we're going to pretend that there was no electoral fraud, I think he lost the election because of his personal behavior. Because for all the people who like that he stuck it, he triggered the libs, he owned the libs, that he shit on the media, I think there was a lot of people who just thought he had no idea what the fuck he was doing. And I also kind of tend to be in that category to a certain extent. Like, I felt embarrassed for supporting him with just some of the shit he was saying or doing. The whole America gun thing, it's just kind of a cultural thing. Um, oh, just before we get back to the topic, George again says, you made some of my favorite videos this year. Love the live stream on the Armies of Sand and your Attack on Titan redemption arc. Thank you, I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. On the whole gun issue, once again, there's a cultural divide, and people can call me a pussy or whatever, but I don't come from America, so some of these things just don't aren't as emotional to me. Um, I support the right of people to bear arms. I support the right of people to own guns and stuff like that. But I don't like particular. It's not an issue I'm super invested in. Personally, I'd like to own some guns at some point and learn how to shoot and stuff. Where I live at the moment, I'm not allowed to own guns. Basically, uh, it's theoretically legal, but most rental agreements, and I think within the city of Toronto proper, you're not allowed to own guns or ammunition or anything like that. So realistically, I don't think the American people are going to do shit with their guns against the federal government. I think they'll talk a lot of shit. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. Trump was a dumbass, but he was our dumbass. I mean, I agree, but yeah. I mean, I personally think the primary use of guns is to defend yourself and your house. I don't know if I don't know if realistically um, people are going to actually use them against the government, but I do believe very much you have the right to self defense um, with them. Uh, Taigawa says, without guns, how will the Canadians defend themselves against the literal bears? I mean, gun ownership is very widespread in Canada than the urban elite in the US are. I mean, in Canada, I'm pretty sure self defense is just blatantly illegal. It has some of the like strictest, most nonsensical laws in the world. So, but yeah, people widely own guns in Canada, in rural areas, and probably even in like smaller towns and stuff like that. Particularly, I think out west and in northern Ontario, because there are lots of predators like bears and coyotes and wolves and all kinds of shit like that. And just hunting for a lot of people is how they get through the winter. You shoot a moose or something, you go and you get it butchered. You have food for like a year. A moose has a lot of meat on it. I think that's something you will see more in the US is you're just going to start seeing a decentralization. States are just going to start ignoring the federal government. I mean, we're already seeing that with some of the vaccine mandates in the National Guard. So I don't know how much further that'll go. It'll probably just over time. I think the federal government is just gonna. It's not going to dissolve, but I think it's going to go more in another direction. I thought the plural of moose was moose. I could be wrong though, but yeah, like also there's lots of like turkeys and pheasants and deer and all kinds of stuff to hunt in Canada. All sorts of stuff that I'm sure is good eating. But once again, I live in a suburban area, so people don't really hunt around here. I'd like to go do it at some point, though. Fishing's also really big in Canada because we have a lot of salmon and trout and stuff like that. I am a big fan of rainbow trout. Rainbow trout is like the best shit in the world. Get some rainbow trout, fry it up with garlic and butter, and serve it with some rice. Oh, that shit is amazing. Rain's just sitting on her chair over in a corner sleeping. She's had a pretty busy week. When we had Christmas Day, she's a cat, so she really likes to play with wrapping paper and tissue paper. So she was just going completely apeshit over that, but it's good. Let me think what else happened this year. My grandmother died last week. So I'm down to one grandparent on my mother's side, just my grandfather. I'm not particularly upset about it, to be honest. She's kind of been brain dead for the last couple of years now. So it's kind of a relief that she's passed on. I hadn't really been able to have a conversation with her in the last 5 years. So I didn't really cry or anything like that. Probably the thing that's, and I'm gonna have to do a video on this, and this is gonna be very self-indulgent and very kind of petty, but my grandparents inherited well over $1 million from their parents and from other people in their family, and they've done the best they can to spend it all or to give it all away to charity. So I'll probably wind up just not getting any money whatsoever out of it, even though my sister and I are their only grandkids, and really them along with my mother are their only living relatives. But we'll probably wind up getting almost none of it. I think most of it's going to be left to various charities that have emotionally manipulated them into giving them cash. Which I don't know. I just find that really disgusting, to be honest. Um, I don't know. Once again, I just think it's I don't know. To me, the whole point of accumulating money in a lot of cases is to give it to your kids. I don't understand this whole thing with oh, I need to teach my kids responsibility, and I'm going to teach my kids responsibility by what's it called again? Is just to not leave any that oh, your kids need to earn their own way. I think it's a very like Anglo boomer way of looking at the world. It's like the Anglo thing is I'm gonna kick my kids out at the age 18, and if they starve in the street, that's fine. uh Also, the money they got was from in the form of inheritance. So they would go on like 4 or 5 cruises a year, most of which they complained about and hated. When we cleaned out their house, they had purchased tens of thousands of dollars in stuff they never opened to feed a shopping addiction and just all this other shit. So it's, I mean, at my point in my life, a even a couple tens of thousands of like even if it was like 20 grand, that would be kind of life changing. That would really help me kind of get set up and going. But I'm not gonna get that. My mother's probably not gonna get that. So my uncle, who I despise, and I've told my mother that if she ever has him over, I'm not going to be in the house. So when I heard that my grandmother was on her deathbed, my immediate response is Um, okay, mom, just take me over to grandma. I don't care if I have to get a rapid test or whatever. I want to say my respects and say goodbye to her because that's just what you do as a like a human being, as a son, as a grandson. If you can, you go and you pay your respects to your dying relatives. I don't see like that just seems like basic human decency. So I went over and my uncle was like, "Oh, I can't really come. I might come in a couple of days." So he more or less just refused to go see his mother die, who was dying. Um, and then he immediately snaked on my mother and started trying to manipulate my grandfather into getting not leaving us whatever small amount of money will be left to us. So I don't know. He's just I really fucking hate him. I kind of destroyed my mother's relationship with him because I told him so he's in his 60s and the only real job he's ever really had is a school bus driver. And for about 30 years of his life, he made money as a professional activist and as a lab rat for experiments. So I just told him that he was a worthless leech whose entire life was based on playing the victim and not contributing anything to society and blaming other people for his own failures, and that it was pathetic that he was in his 60s and he's still complaining that his 90-year-old father ruined his life when he was 18. And I kind of became his arch nemesis after that. That and he was a cuckold because he was literally the kept man of some woman with uh some woman with schizophrenia who basically kept him, and he was her personal chauffeur and made breakfast for her and made breakfast for the dog and just basically waited on her hand and foot because that's just the kind of dude that he was. He is, and I fucking despise him, and I don't want him in my parent. Well, I get like I said, it's my parents' house. It's not my house. If they want to have him over, they can, but I refuse to be here because he's a cunt who emotionally abused my mother. Ruined life at 18. How? Um, Basically, I don't know the whole story, but he wanted to be a guitar player and he smoked a lot of pot. And my grandfather, I think, just said he was a degenerate and told him to go to school or to do something productive with his life. And he believes he would have been a major rock star if my grandfather hadn't have told him to fuck off. So I think that's not a bad year in review. I'm gonna try to get Serp on for something a little more retrospective or something like that. So